Good morning. Good morning. Appreciate Nate for that scripture reading. So we're in part 6 of an 8-part series called Backstory, study in the book of Ruth. On Friday mornings, I'll often drive down to the McDonald's in downtown Stamford and pick up some breakfast for Kendra and for me. A couple of Fridays ago, I was standing in line inside McDonald's, and 2 or 3 people in front of me was a woman who had a very large bag. It looked like she was traveling. It was a duffel bag, the kind that had wheels on one end so you could prop it up on those wheels and move it. It was a very large bag. It probably went up to here on her. And I watched as she struggled to maneuver the bag up to the counter to place her order, and then struggled to move the bag over to the place where you wait for your order, and then juggle the order and the large bag as she made her way out 2 sets of doors to get out of the McDonald's. And there were a number of people along that journey that were offering to help, hold the food, roll the bag. And here was her response. I can do that. I can do this on my own. I don't need your help. Well, when's the last time that you refused help? You refused to receive help. You refused to request help. I have to admit that I have trouble asking for help. I have trouble receiving help. Sometimes I am just like that woman in McDonald's. Now, I used to think that it was because I thought that I could just do everything better on my own. Thank you very much. But I realize that's actually not the case. I realize that somewhere along the way, I learned as a child that I'm not worthy of help. When I ask someone for help, I'm asking for something I'm not entitled to, and I'm requiring something of them that shouldn't be required of them. I don't deserve help, and no one deserves to have to help me. Now, this is a very big deal because the whole story in the book of Ruth hinges on Ruth's willingness to ask for help. We saw this in a short-term way in the message from chapter 2. Ruth and Naomi, her mother-in-law, are barely surviving. They're poor, they're widows, they're terribly under-resourced. And as a short-term stopgap, Ruth goes to the fields owned by Boaz, and she collects the gleanings along with other women who were doing the same, the leftovers, after the workers had gone through the first time in the fields. And that was okay. That provided some food for a few days or a few weeks, maybe even a few months. But what they really needed was a long-term solution to these significant shortcomings in their lives. And so in our text this morning in chapter 3, we'll watch as Ruth courageously requests help for this long-term need in her life. Let's just sort of unfold what was read earlier to us. So verse 1, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" Naomi, the mother-in-law, articulates the need for Ruth, her daughter-in-law. What Ruth really needs, more than her next meal, what she really needs is a place of rest. That's the literal word there, a place of rest, a home, stability, security, and a way to be well. Not only now, not only tomorrow, but on into the future. Naomi recognizes that what's needed is a long-term solution a home with ample resources for the foreseeable future. Verse 2 is not Boaz, our relative, with whose young women you were. She recognizes that Boaz could be the long-term solution, not just the short-term solution. She mentions him for a couple of reasons. One, which we'll look at more closely later, he's our relative. Boaz is in the same clan as Ruth and Naomi. He's family. And so perhaps they can count on family for this long-term need in their lives. And second, she mentions Boaz because of his character. She reminds Ruth that she was among the young women who were collecting gleanings in the field earlier in chapter 2, and she knows how helpful he was, how protective he was, how generous he was. He's a person of character and might be counted on to provide the help that's needed in this circumstance. And then finally, see, he's winnowing barley at the threshing floor. She recognizes there's an opportunity coming up for a big ask. Boaz, along with other men in the village, was going to the threshing floor. This was a public space in many ancient villages. After the harvest, the grain would be brought there, and it would be winnowed. The chaff would be separated from the grain. Wind was often a useful factor in this. She notes that he's going to the threshing floor at night, as we'll see here in just a moment, perhaps because the breezes at night were a little more predictable, a little less gusty than those breezes in the rest of the day. He's going to be there. Other people will be there. It's a public space, but his presence there seems to present an opportunity for Ruth to reconnect with him to make this ask. So Naomi presents a plan to Ruth. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. So Naomi tells Ruth to do three things: wash, anoint, and dress. Wash, that is probably a full bath. Anoint, perhaps with scented olive oil. And dress with a cloak, or depending on the translation, your better clothes. A cloak, perhaps because it's going to be at night, the temperature's dropped, she needs something to stay warm, or better clothes. This could be a reference to mourning clothes. Her husband passed away in chapter 1. Perhaps she's been in grieving since then, wearing clothes that symbolize her mourning, her grieving. Perhaps Naomi is telling her it's now time to take off those clothes, to change those clothes into something else in order to make this request. She is to go down to the threshing floor having done these three things. And we might note two other Old Testament texts as it relates to those three things. In Exodus 19, and you might even write that down in the margin of your Bible in this spot, Exodus 19. The people of God are told to do the same three things before they encounter God. They are to wash, be anointed, and to dress. Perhaps Ruth and Naomi envision something similar here, that in going to Boaz for help, they're actually going to God for help. And so she washes, is anointed, and dresses as the people of God did to encounter God in Exodus 19. Another text, Ezekiel 16. You might write that in your margin, Ezekiel 16. It's a marriage text. And the marriage is between God and his people. And as God encounters Israel, he encourages his people to wash, to be anointed, and dress in preparation for their marriage, their wedding with God. And that may be the clue that we need to understand what's about to happen. What Ruth is going to Boaz to do is to propose a marriage, to make a marriage proposal to Boaz. It's bold, it's courageous, it's audacious, and it's the very thing that could provide the long-term needs for Ruth and for Naomi. She is not to make herself known as she goes down to the threshing floor, not because she's doing something wrong, but to honor Boaz, to provide space for Boaz to respond to this marriage proposal in whatever way he deems best. Naomi doesn't want occurring on the threshing floor what sometimes occurs in Major League Baseball games or football games, where on the Jumbotron there's this couple and one partner gets down on knee and makes a proposal and the other partner rebuffs them. Naomi doesn't want that happening here on the threshing floor. This is to be discreet. This is to be private so that Boaz can respond in any way that he desires. And then, according to the plan, she is to uncover his feet and lie down. Now, there is endless commentary on what that phrase means. There's a group of commentators who believe this is a sexual innuendo and that Ruth is to seduce Boaz so that he ends up being obligated to marry her. That, to me, doesn't seem to fit the tone of the book as a whole and the character of Ruth that's described in the book and the character of Boaz that's described in the book. I think this is probably a position of humility. To be at someone's feet in that ancient culture was to adopt a humble posture and humility. She goes to make this bold and audacious request. And there could be a bit of a punch to this phrase, uncover his feet. One more Old Testament text in Deuteronomy chapter 25. There's a scenario given to us where a husband has died, leaving the wife a widow, and the brother of the husband who has died is legally obligated by biblical law to marry the widow and to have a child with that widow. If that brother refuses to do so, you know what the widow is called to do? She's called to grab the sandal off his feet, to uncover his feet, and to spit in his face. Now, Boaz is not the brother of Ruth's deceased husband, but it could be that some of that imagery is being used here. This could be Ruth's way of saying to Boaz, I know that you know that I know that you've got some family obligation here, and I'm calling you on it. Marry me. And so, verse 5. And she replied, all that you say I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. Verse 7. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? It's been a long day of winnowing, of laboring at the threshing floor. Boaz eats, he drinks, he's fulfilled, he lies down and goes to sleep on the threshing floor. Probably other men have done the same, guarding the grain that they have winnowed that evening. Discreetly, honoring Boaz, Ruth comes. She does everything according to the plan. And at midnight, in the middle of the night, Boaz awakes and he feels someone down there at his feet. Whoa, it's dark. He has no idea who this is. Who are you? He asks. And notice how Ruth responds. And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Notice Ruth's initial response. I am Ruth. This is really significant. Throughout the book, Ruth has been called a Moabite, a foreigner, a daughter-in-law, a widow. But Ruth responds with her name. I am Ruth. Ruth responds in a way that indicates that she is a person in her own right. She is valuable and worthy as a human being. She is a woman with a name. And it's her own sense of identity that gives her the courage now to make this request. She also indicates that she sees herself as your servant. The Hebrew word used here would be a word that would be appropriate for someone that was a wife. Now, that may make us a little uncomfortable, a wife calling herself a servant, but it was part of that ancient culture. And then here comes the ask. Spread your wings over your servant. Once again, you might write Ezekiel 16 in the margin of your Bible right there, because this is language reminiscent of the language in Ezekiel 16. It's a marriage text between God and the people of Israel. And when God sees that Israel's ready for his love, he spreads his wings. He spreads the corner of his garment over the people in love. The same language has been used in Ruth chapter 2, verse 12. And so this seems to be Naomi saying to Boaz, Boaz, I want you to do for me what God did for the people of Israel, what God did for his bride, Israel. Spread your wings over your servant. Marry me. And as one last little zinger, she says, for you are a redeemer. And we'll spend all next Sunday exploring that phrase and all of its implications. For now, we'll just note that it's a word that indicates, once again, that he's part of her clan. He's part of family. He's an important member of the family. And this could be Ruth's way of saying, I know you know that I know that you're family. You've got some obligation here, so marry me. Boaz's response initially, verse 10, and he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You've made this last kindness, chesed, greater than the first, in that you've not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. What's fascinating is that Boaz receives the request for help as an act of chesed, of loving kindness. It's an important word that we've talked about in this series. He notes that Ruth has shown chesed before the last kindness greater than the first. She's referring to the way that Ruth has cared for her mother-in-law, Naomi. But now Boaz says, this audacious, bold, courageous request for help is a chesed even to me, because Boaz recognizes that Ruth could have other husbands. But she's come to him and requested boldly and courageously that he marry her. And in the end, he agrees to. There are a few strings left to tie up. We'll talk about those next Sunday. But in the end, Boaz agrees to help Ruth. Now, all this seems strange to us. This very male-dominated ancient culture. Here's a woman making a marriage proposal. These strange customs of uncovering the feet, spreading wings or garment over someone. This strangeness around the fact that these two people are related. And we don't tend to encourage those kind of marriages in our culture. But it makes sense in that culture. And Boaz understands exactly what Ruth is asking. To really appreciate what's going on here, we just have to kind of push aside our Western views of marriage. In our Western world, marriage happens when two people meet each other and they get to know each other, and they start dating, and they fall in love, and out of all those romantic feelings, they get married. But in this culture, as in some cultures still today, marriage was different. It also involved responsibility and duty and obligation and stability and provision. All of that is in play here. But in summary, Naomi has identified that Ruth needs a long-term solution if she's going to live. And courageously, Ruth goes to Boaz to make an enormous ask, marry me. And Boaz says yes. So a couple of takeaways in the story. Number one, as the backstory to Jesus, the book of Ruth shows that the story of Jesus depended on the willingness of Ruth and Naomi to courageously and confidently request help. The story really stalls out at this point if Ruth doesn't ask for help. It stalls. It can't progress any further at this point because there's something that Ruth needs that she cannot provide on her own. And it's only her courage, it's only her humility in asking for help in this bold, audacious way that allows the story to continue. And think about how many times our own stories stall out because we won't ask for help. We're scared to ask for help. We don't know how to ask for help. And our own story stalls out. So often, the only way for us to move to the next page in our story is to ask for help. Because there's simply things that we cannot do on our own. And second, when Boaz receives Ruth's request as hesed, he reveals that sometimes even our boldest request may be received as a person's biggest reward. Sometimes we won't ask for the help that we need because we don't want to be a bother. We don't want to be a burden. But the reality is reflected in this story that sometimes the person we ask will be overjoyed that we ask. Sometimes the person we ask for help will be delighted to give that help. Because helping, assisting, providing does something for them as well. They might even see it as an act of chesed on your part. Let me close with a story of a time when I didn't ask for help. When you grow up in a small town, transportation is really not much of an issue. Even on my short third grade legs, I could walk from our house at one end of Sunspot to my dad's office at the other end of Sunspot in 20 minutes or less. No Uber, no cab, no mass transit needed when you grow up in a small town. But when you begin to think about traveling outside the small town, transportation does become an issue. For example, on our school bus, it could take as long as an hour to reach the nearest school. And the road to that nearest school was a winding path through the mountains with steep grades, sharp corners, and dangerous drop-offs by the side of the road. I suppose it was difficult to find people that would take that low-paying, high-risk job of driving that school bus back and forth. And so bus drivers tended to rotate through our bus the way that cashiers sometimes rotate through McDonald's, just there until something better comes along. I remember one bus driver. He was a young man, and so he stuck out. I can't remember his name, so I'll just call him Hank. Hank was wild-eyed, and Hank had wild hair. In my memory, he resembled every bad guy in the Adam 12 reruns that we used to watch at home. Hank hated to drive the bus. Hank hated those of us who rode the bus. Be quiet. Sit down. You miserable kids. Were all phrases I remember hearing from Hank. Hank created an atmosphere of fear and anxiety for 1 hour drives, twice a day, 5 days a week. Maybe because he hated driving the bus so much, and maybe because he hated those of us who rode the bus so much, Hank drove the bus faster and more dangerously than anybody I'd ever known to drive the school bus. And that went on for months. Winter came, and with it the usual snowfalls and snowdrifts in those pre-climate change days. Our mountain peaks attracted even more snow than our Connecticut and New York homes here do. And one frigid day, Hank was in a frigid mood as he drove the school bus from the school back to Sunspot. When you pull into Sunspot, the road is just one big circle, just one big turnaround. There's a couple of spots where kids are unloaded. And as Hank approached one of the spots to stop and unload some of us, the dog of one of the families who had a kid on the bus started running alongside the bus. This was a beautiful dog. Milky white fur. You could hardly even see the dog as he ran along those snowdrifts. I love to nuzzle my face in his fur like nuzzling a snowstorm. But we all saw the dog, and I know that Hank saw the dog because I remember him saying, "Oh yeah? You want some of this?" And Hank turned the bus in the dog's direction. And in an instant, the dog was gone. We all knew it. Hank knew it. It was my first brush with death of any kind. The bus skidded to a stop, and the family whose dog it was, whose child was on the bus, collected their child from the bus and collected all of us off of the bus, and some other adults came along and began to deal with Hank. And I share that moment just to illustrate how badly I needed help, how badly all of us needed help. For months, we needed someone to save us from Hank. We needed someone to get rid of Hank. And I never asked for help. I didn't know who to ask for help. I didn't know how to ask for help. I mean, who does a third grader turn in his bus driver to? It was Hank's last day to drive. He was fired immediately. And once the adults realized what had been going on, help came by the handfuls. I remember that family gathering all of us on the bus into their dining room and serving us hot chocolate and snacks, just trying to calm us down. Once the adults realized what had been happening, help came by the handfuls. But we needed help long before that. And I never asked for it. And it seems to me that in different seasons of our lives, we're all third graders. riding a bus of fear or anxiety or addiction or despair and depression or brokenness, and we need help getting off. And one of the things the book of Ruth reveals to us is that it's okay to ask for help. Even if it feels bold and audacious, even if you're a little worried at what the response would be, it's okay to ask for the help that's needed. And you just may be surprised at how grateful the person you ask is that you asked. So let me just leave you in silence for a few seconds and invite you to reflect on these two questions this morning. What do I need help with? And who can I ask for help?